On the Senate floor Tuesday, Republican leader Mitch McConnell continued to rail against Democratic lawmakers for high prices. McConnell said, quote, "Democrats' policies are sucker-punching American families every time they set foot in the checkout line." Inflation climbed 8.3% in August, slowing down for a second consecutive month, but still rising more than expected as investors await definitive signs that the Federal Reserve's interest rate hikes may finally bring inflation back down to normal levels. Overall prices were up 0.1% from July. This matched economists' expectations, but up from zero monthly growth in June, according to data released by the Labor Department on Tuesday. Republicans have continued to hammer President Biden and Democrats over inflation, as pocketbook issues remain central to their midterm messaging.
Just a few minutes ago, yet again, the American people received a monthly inflation report that was even worse than the expert predictions. The expectation was that Democrats' runaway inflation might finally begin to actually level off. The top-line inflation rate was expected to fall. Instead, yet again, the opposite happened. Overall inflation was up even higher. Prices this past August were still 8.3% higher than they were in August of 2021. Just a catastrophically high inflation rate. Food prices went up another 0.8% just this past month alone. Overall food prices just logged their biggest one-year increase since the late 1970s. Groceries in particular are now 13.5% more expensive than they were at this time last year. Democrats' policies are sucker-punching American families every time they set foot in the checkout line. Eggs are up 40%. Butter up 25%. Baby food up 13%. Chicken, dairy, bread, cereal, and canned fruits and vegetables are all up around 16% each. Coffee is up even more than that. Housing and shelter costs were up. Medical costs were up. Furniture up. New cars up. Electricity costs were way up, a 15.8% increase since last year. So let me say that again. Inflation on America's electricity bills alone is 15.8% in just the last 12 months. This is the largest one-year increase in electricity prices since 1981, when the statistic was looking back into the final months of Jimmy Carter. Even if you take out energy and food prices, two areas where the administration likes to pass the buck and pretend they are powerless, inflation skyrocketed 0.6% in just the month of August alone. 8.3% inflation, Mr. President, just an astonishing number. And remember, this figure only looks back to 2021. But remember, in August 2021, the baseline, we were already talking about runaway inflation. Prices were already way up compared to the year before that. So the 12-month number dramatically understates the total damage that Democrats have caused. Here's the comparison that matters most to American families, especially with an election in less than 2 months. How are things today compared to January 2021, when this all-Democratic government was sworn in? How are they compared to January 2021? Here's the answer. Food prices are up a total of 13.9% since President Biden was sworn in. Gas prices are up 58.5%. Electricity costs are up 21.6%. And the overall across-the-board inflation rate since President Biden took office is a catastrophic 12.5%. This very day, President Biden and Democrats are having a big celebration for their latest reckless spending bill, which they pretended would reduce inflation but which nonpartisan experts say will actually make it worse. They could not look more out of touch if they tried. Now, on another matter, this past weekend, Vice President Harris made a surprising announcement on Meet the Press. The Vice President declared, listen to this, the border is secure. We're about to close the fiscal year with more than 2 million illegal immigrant encounters on our southern border, breaking the all-time record that we only just set last year. Seizures of lethal fentanyl are also on pace to exceed last year's total. They're up more than 200% in just the latest month on record. These are not the signs of a secure border, and the American people know it. An outright majority of the country disapproves of how President Biden has been handling this issue. The Vice President's claims aren't fooling anyone. For years now, this crisis has stretched border communities to the breaking point and caused ripples throughout the entire country. All the while, Democrats have claimed it would be cruel or uncompassionate to have a functioning southern border or actually enforce our laws. Now, in recent weeks, the country has been treated to one of the more striking displays of irony we've seen in quite a while. For many years, while the citizens and local governments on the border have cried out for help and law enforcement, various Democrat-run cities and states that aren't on the border decided to set themselves up as virtue signaling sanctuary cities where immigration law supposedly simply did not apply. For years, much of the political left has suggested there are no legitimate practical reasons why a country would want secure borders or enforce its immigration laws. Only racism or xenophobia could possibly explain it. Well, for several weeks now, some of these overwhelmed states have decided to try taking some of these Democrat-run jurisdictions at their word. Governor Abbott in Texas and Governor Ducey in Arizona have put a very small proportion of the illegal immigrants pouring into their states onto buses bound for the self-advertised sanctuary cities of New York and Washington. And you know what? Just this very small taste of chaos, this tiny little sliver of what many places in America have been dealing with for years, have these cities' Democratic leaders outraged, anxious, and scrambling. Eric Adams, the mayor of New York, has only had to receive in 5 weeks roughly the number of people that the Border Patrol encounters in 7 or 8 hours. New York has had over a month to handle a fraction of one day's share of border crossings. And yet the mayor says having to deal with this is, quote, horrific. New York City officials complain that they are overwhelmed. Here in Washington, the destination for fewer than 8,000 illegal immigrants, the Democrat mayor has declared a public health emergency. She begged the Pentagon to send in the National Guard for help. The Defense Department, of course, turned her down. It's incredible just how quickly Democrats change their tune when they have to stomach one single spoonful of the policies they've been force-feeding the rest of our country. Oh, it's challenging to have waves of illegal immigrants pouring into your community. This creates challenges for housing and medical care and resource allocation and law enforcement. Who knew all this? As one former mayor from the front lines of this crisis put it recently, quote, the city of McAllen was able to deal with thousands of immigrants a day. I think they can handle a few hundred. Maybe this will be the wake-up call the Democrats need to finally understand that functional nations need functional borders.